bit about me. I've been doing FIRST since 1998. So I've been around a long time. I took time off for college, which, you're a student? Take time off for college. Just go to college. Experience college. The point of FIRST is not to make you want to do FIRST more and more. The point of FIRST is to get you interested in science and technology, and ultimately that hopefully means a career for you in science and technology. That means eventually you have to stop doing FIRST for some period of time. And then if you decide to come back, we will welcome you with open arms. So I'm ex-FRC 2789, ex-FRC 41, twice, once as a student, once as a mentor. So I've been around, I've seen stuff. I'm a Woody Flowers finalist award winner, and I'm the competition coordinator for TRR. So like I say, I've seen a lot of stuff. Anyway, you can find this presentation at goo.gl/M, lowercase j, capital I, lowercase WSE. Free and available to the public. Use it however you would like. I would caution you that this is a bit of a text-heavy presentation. Please use it when you get back to your teams as a reference. It's not meant to be just kind of presented. It's also a reference for you when you get back to your teams on some pointers of how you can do things a little more efficiently to not go totally crazy at competition. All right, we're going to talk about two major phases of this. One is the preparation, the things you do before competition day, and the second is what you actually do on the competition day to have a better time. This is just a bulleted list of what we're going to go through. A lot of it makes sense, I would hope, kind of prima facie, but it's often forgotten. And some of it is a little counterintuitive, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Hopefully this will take us about 30 minutes and then we'll have time for questions. Okay, the rules. And I always have to say this, read the rule book. It's hilarious how many teams don't actually read the rule book. They assume the thing is the same from year to year, and yeah, there's huge, enormous chunks, particularly section 4 of the competition manual, that are the same from year to year, but there are so many teams that don't read the rule book, it drives me nuts. So I'll tell you that my teams, since 2012, which would all have been 2789, literally, and we picked this one up from John V. Noon at 148, we open the rule book in PDF format on everybody's iPad, tablet, computer, otherwise reading device, and we literally read every single word, starting with section 1, introduction, and ending with, that's the end of the glossary. So we know exactly what's in the rule book. We pause several times as we read this rule book from start to finish. We make sure we understand any nuances that are going on. We identify problems like, hey, wait, that doesn't make sense. Okay, team update coming on Friday. Something to that effect. So doing that on the weekend of kickoff, this act is probably the best thing you can do to make your day at competition easier. The second best thing you can do is actually read the inspection checklist. If you show up at inspection with your robot and you don't know that it should pass, you have done something wrong. Because FIRST tells you you have to be in compliance with all the rules. FIRST tells you what they're going to check at the inspection. They will tell you exactly what the inspector is looking for. And for you to fail to go through that checklist on your own is doing yourself a disservice. Last point, understanding design utilization rules. So that's actually in the administrative manual, the part that you have now. It's one of those things that doesn't really change. The key element of understanding the design utilization rules is you can use any design, not a part, a design, that you have produced prior to the kickoff and have publicly released. That doesn't mean that you go on to Chief Delphi and have to broadcast it to everybody. If you put it in a Google folder and make it public and searchable, it's publicly released. If you post it to your own website, it's publicly released. Why do I say this? The number of times that I've witnessed teams rewrite software from scratch year after year after year boggles my mind. Yes, it's important for new students to understand how the software is developed, principles behind it. But for you to write your software from scratch every single year is just a little counterproductive. Same thing goes for common parts that you use. Say one year you develop a 3D printed hold down mechanism for your Rio. Or, yeah, we're still calling it a Rio, right? You can use that year after year. You don't have to redesign that part from scratch so long as you take that design, effectively the root CAD file, the part file in SolidWorks, the part file in Inventor, and post it publicly. And then a last word of advice on this whole concept. Yes, you can build one of these robots in a garage, but it's not a garage project. It's an engineering project. That's going to be a bit of a recurring theme as we go forward, because I'll say a few times, sure, you can do it with blah, but you're better off doing it with nya, and then we'll explain why. This is the only software slide, I promise, because I know software is very for a lot of people. SCM, source control, excuse me, source control systems are your friends. Why are source control systems your friends? Well, first of all, if you use a public service like GitHub, your code's already public, so you've satisfied your design utilization rule out of the gate. The second thing is, and this is my personal recommendation, if you use Git, which is the source control that runs the backbone of the Linux kernel, so it's very widely distributed, open source, totally free. The way that Git works is it allows you to locally store changes. So, and let me caveat this by saying, this is for text-based software, so Java and C++. Doesn't work so well for LabVIEW, but LabVIEW has its own source control mechanism. So please use a source control mechanism. If you use Git, you have the advantage of locally tracking changes without needing to actually hook up to the server that hosts the code. What that means is when you are at your event and you come in, let's assume regional model for the time being, you come in on Thursday and you start your practice day, and you have to start changing software, either because you have a defect in the code or you want to do more with it. By being able to locally start off your revisions, if you go 3-4 revisions down in development, and then you say, whoops, I got to go back, it's really easy to tell Git, revert all my code back to where it was at 9 a.m. And then that way, you don't have to go, oh, geez, did I change this? No, I did. Did it? Did I? Didn't I? Didn't? No. You just say git revert, boom, pushes the code back to where you started. The other thing is, and this is kind of what's illustrated here in this picture, you can make multiple copies of your code and have different people working on it simultaneously, and then merge it all back together. So I've noticed a pattern in teams where you tend to have one person working on the code, and that's a bad idea. It's a bad idea for a couple of reasons. One, you're kind of excluding a bunch of people on this enormous software task, and if you think that source code and first can be contained in one file, you're not really getting the full message. If you have multiple people working on it, you get more contributors, you get more eyes on a given feature, you get feedback on how to maybe do that better. So if you limit it to just this one person sitting at one laptop writing the code, not so great an idea. Git allows you to branch the code in a way that you can easily get multiple people working on the project simultaneously. So again, 3 things. Access your code from anywhere, make sure you put your stuff on GitHub, make sure you put your stuff on some other internet available resource so you don't have to carry a copy in a thumb drive. Automatically satisfy your utilization rules. That's, like I say, put on the internet, make it public, get it out of the way. You have nothing in here that is your intellectual property when you think about it. You may not want to let everybody know what you're doing. You may not want to broadcast it to the universe, but it's not like you're developing a product that you're going to cash in on. You're developing code to run a robot for an educational robotics competition. Track your changes locally. That's my point about, particularly with Git, that you have your local repository sitting on your machine that you can locally track your changes and locally roll back without having to use the internet. Because remember, you're not going to have internet at the competition. Whoops. Sorry. Okay. Fasteners. Again, this is a pre-step. This is a planning step. This is actually a pre-season step. And I mean this first statement. The drill index is the bane of my existence in FRC. I detest drill indices in FRC. I'm being very clear about in FRC, because a drill index is a wonderful tool for a house. It's a wonderful tool for a general purpose fabrication shop. It is a terrible waste of money for an FRC team. Here's why. Take a handful of fastener sizes, and I list them out here. There's 5 fasteners up there. Those 5 fasteners will satisfy 100% of your mounting needs in FRC. You will not need another drill bit. Everything you want to do is in this list. 1032s for structural connections. 1032s are also your PDB mounts. 832, that's a Victor SP or Talon SR mount. Not Talon SR, the small Talon. What are we calling the small Talon now? The small Talon, the small Victor, the one that doesn't have screw terminals. The 632 is the old Talon, the old Victor mount. It's also the pneumatic control module mount, etc. I put the 440 in parentheses because the only thing I know of that uses a 440 screw now is a micro switch. And a 5/32 inch rivet, which is a wonderful, drill a hole, pop it in, get a plate from Vex or Rev or whoever you want to get it from. They all use 5/32 for the rivet size. What does that mean? You need 5 drill bits. And those 5 drill bits will take care of 100% of your mounting needs. Number 7 is the clearance hole for the structural fastener. The 21 is the tap hole for that fastener. And oh, by the way, it's also the clearance hole for a 5/32. And then you only need tap holes for the 8-6 and the 440 because your clearance hole is in the part that you're trying to mount. So literally with 5 drill bits and 5 fasteners, you can cover everything you need. Now, you need different lengths of these fasteners, but at least you're not carrying 3 dozen sizes in 5 lengths each in 22 boxes that take up an enormous space. So if you are disciplined about it and you say, these are the 5 fasteners I need, those are the 5 drill bits I'm going to have, and I never use another size, you make your life a lot easier. Reliability, and here you can see I include some links to particular products you can go to. Reliability is actually very simply stated, and I wrote this for a freshman, because let's face it, 13-year-olds don't always have the vocabulary. Need not move. Things that should move need to move smoothly. Emphasis on smoothly. So, gearboxes. You will find in the kit of parts gearbox, there's a little packet of red automotive grease. And that's what AndyMark provides, and it's dirt cheap, which is why they provide it. Why? Because AndyMark is donating that. They're trying to drive their costs down. They're trying to drive their revenue up. They're fundamentally a business, which means they're going to give you enough grease that you don't damage the gearbox, but not necessarily the best grease to use. So invest $12 and buy a pound, which will last you about 20 seasons of PTFE, that's Teflon. Lithium grease is the base material with molybdenum sulfide. Okay, this is black goop. It's black goop, but it's crazy awesome goop. It's crazy awesome black goop that will mean that your gearboxes do not corrode, they will run smoothly, and they can run hot and not damage themselves. When you get to that first match as a second year or a rookie, and all of a sudden you realize you get 6 minutes to turn the thing around, and your gearboxes are still hot, what's going on in there with cheap grease is you have no grease. It's turned into liquid. It's water. It's not protecting anything, and you will chew up your gearbox. Spend $12 for a pound of this stuff that will last you like 20 seasons, and you avoid that entire problem. In the drivetrain, spacer sizes matter. So people think that a drivetrain is a shaft with a shaft collar and a wheel. It's not. The best drivetrain is a shaft that is rigid due to spacers. You can cut your own spacers, you can buy your spacers. It's entirely up to you. The key thing is, if you can grab a wheel on the drivetrain and push in and out on the shaft and that wheel moves, you're asking for trouble. You're going to wear something out. That bearing's going to wobble. Something's going to go wrong. So, spacer sizes matter. You can get it down to 1/16 of an inch increments from Vex, or if you have a lathe and some round stock and a 1/2 inch drill bit with 505 reamer, you can make exactly the size that you need. Regardless, that spacer size needs to be very tightly toleranced. It needs to be a rigid shaft. If that shaft is wobbling, you're going to rip up a bearing. How do you rip up a bearing, or how do you get the shaft to wobble? You do not have enough rigidity in the shaft, your outside mount isn't strong enough, any number of things. Spacers help to alleviate that. Springs, and that link takes you to a particular type of spring that's used as a for this application. It's called a finger spring that basically slides on the end of the shaft and gives you a little cushion to take up the slack. And then shaft collars. You have to have a shaft collar or some of the rigid face on the outside of the shaft holding everything on. So if you're going to go the West Coast drive style and everything's going to be cantilevered out, there needs to be a shaft collar on the end of it. If you're going to go more kit style, you have to make sure you have a bearing on the outside edge. One way or another, there needs to be some solid support on the outside of the drivetrain. Shaft collars accomplish that for the West Coast drive, which is easier to maintain. The outside bearing on, say, a kit chassis makes up for that. You will note that if you open up a kit chassis, there are spacers in there that are exactly sized, made out of cheap plastic, which is just fine. Spacer doesn't have to be made out of steel, but it's tight, it's rigid all the way across. So, please, for the love of God, do not go to Home Depot and buy the $9 pair of this long with every possible crimper size and stripper size in it. That style of stripper or crimper is terrible. If you're working on your house and you're going to crack open a junction box and you're going to make some modifications and twist on some wire nuts and shove it all back in there and it's not going to move, fine, go ahead and use that tool. If you're going to do an FRC robot, and this is one of these, hey, you could do it with that tool, but you're better off doing it with that. These are ratcheting style or spring style stripper and crimper. So the spring style means that essentially it's a mechanism. The strippers cost about 30 bucks, clamps the insulation on the wire, cuts the insulation, pulls it apart, all in one smooth motion that I've seen 13-year-olds do with no problem. Compare that to the experience a 13-year-old has with a cheap, just plier style stripper, and you'll find out that that person is much more capable of doing the job with the better tool. Again, 30, 35 bucks for that. The crimpers. That crimper links to a ratcheting crimper with interchangeable dies from Automation Direct. Automation Direct sponsors first. You get somewhere around 30 bucks in your kit of parts. That crimper will crimp terminals in a way that they will never come off. I've hung 100 pounds off of one of those crimp terminals and it's not come off. I've had the screws fail before the terminal comes off. So please take the time to get a good set of crimpers. Another item on here, which is, excuse me. Another item on here is ferrules. What's a ferrule? It's a little tube. It's a piece of metal. It means that when you strip that wire and you've got all these wonderfully frayed ends on it, you basically take this ferrule, which is a little tube, slide it over the stripped end and crimp it. And there's a crimper for a ferrule. And that means that the end of your wire is not a bunch of strands coming out that can do this. Instead, you've basically made a solid end to the wire. It's a lot easier to manage. And depending on the crimper style you get, it'll put little ridges in the crimp so that it will grab the connector. So when you go to the PDP, and you shove the screwdriver in to open up the connector, there's a mechanism that opens, and it's kind of like a guillotine. When you put the ferrule in, the guillotine closes between those ridges, and it's much harder to pull that out compared to a stripped wire. And fine quality connectors. Okay, what do I mean by fine quality connectors? I mean when you get your kit of parts and you pick up that bag with like the 4 samples of wire and the 16 different types of crimpable connector, throw it away. Throw it away or put it in a box that you break out when you get to your event to give to teams, because you should not be using those as anything other than a rookie, unless you're totally cash strapped. You can get quality connectors at quantities around 100 for $5. There's no reason to use cheap connectors or to use cheap wire. Also, I believe I make a mention of wire later. Buy your wire in spools and don't buy home wire. The wire you're looking for is machine tool wire. It has a thinner jacket on it. It's not rated to be buried. It's not rated for a lot of home or industrial applications, but it works just fine for FRC and satisfies all the rules. 100 feet, about 100 bucks, and that 100 feet will last you at least 10 seasons. Unless you do some very long articulation mechanism. Zip tie mounts. Please zip tie your wires. Please zip tie your wires in an organized fashion. I'd really appreciate that as an inspector. It makes my life easier. Key thing that annoys me personally, and again, it's my personal recommendation, all this is my personal recommendation, do not fasten your zip tie mounts with adhesive. In other words, you can go to Radio Shack or you can go to Fry's and you can get these little squares for zip ties that have this like foam sticky stuff on the back of it. That's a bad idea. Because if you ever have to pull that off, it's a pain, number one. Number two, you're gonna find that you're gonna leave just enough oil on the metal or just not clean enough a surface that by the time you get to Champs, your zip tie mount's coming off. You can get 100 of a style that fasten with rivets or screws for about $8. And this is an enormously important one, and I've seen way too many teams with it wrong. Make sure you use polycarbonate as your plastic and not acrylic. Acrylic will shatter. It will shatter when you're cutting it with a bandsaw. So now let's picture what happens when two robots run into each other. One hits the other's piece of acrylic and chunk, it's gone. I have watched teams go to plastic supply houses, ask for polycarbonate, and get acrylic. So be very particular. You want polycarbonate, you want Lexan, you want some other brand name of polycarbonate. Make sure you get polycarbonate. Polycarbonate will bend and bend and bend and not break. Acrylic will shatter.
They feel different and they also smell different.
Yes.
My son makes me smell it. Here, Mom, smell this.
Yeah.
You smell that, they smell different.
Yes. Practice your repair. So it shouldn't be difficult if you've got at least one good engineer on your team for that engineer to look at your machine and say, huh, that's a weak spot. Oh, this is going to wear out. So practice your repairs. It's just a matter of being honest with yourself. You've only got 6 weeks to do this. You're not going to hit it out of the park. You're not going to get exactly the solution you want. You're not going to get a perfectly, purely durable solution. You're going to have some faults. So just identify them and understand how you're going to fix them and how you're going to manage failures if they start to occur. This is actually one I picked up from the Allsparks. Grizzly, which is not a company I would ever buy a machine tool from, but it is a company that I would buy that tool from. It's a vice brake, and that's the Grizzly part number. You can find it online. It's about $40. It's a sheet metal brake designed for a vise. So there's a 90-degree angle on one side, and there's the brake coming in to pinch that, and it's a really easy way to make a bracket if you need to do it quickly and cheaply on the pit floor. Again, you can do that with plastic, you can do that with aluminum, you name it, but if you wanted to put a quick 90-degree bend into something, that's a tool that will do it for cheap. This one drives me nuts because I've made the mistake too many times, which is why access. Okay, what do I mean by access? If you have to contort your way around 3 pieces to get to a fastener, you've done something wrong. If you need to look with a flashlight and a mirror to determine a fuse size, you've done something wrong. If you need to open up a box to look at your control system, you've probably done something wrong. There's not a reason to hide things on your robot. Now, that needs to be balanced against the packaging. You have to get everything into the robot, and things might be very tight. But insofar as you can, try to avoid having to do contortions to work on your robot. At a minimum, it's frustrating. At a maximum, it's dangerous. I had a season back in 2012 that I ripped up my left arm working on the robot just because of where we put certain fasteners and how I had to reach around things, and I get scratched up by zip ties or leftover pieces of metal, etc. Which, by the way, brings, just backing up a step, buy a zip tie gun. Everybody know what a zip tie gun is? So there's it's a ratcheting, it looks kind of like a handgun, but it's obviously not a gun. Colloquial is a zip tie gun. It's a zip tie fastening tool, is usually what you'd find it filed under. So basically you insert the zip tie into the tip, and there's a ratcheting mechanism in there that pulls on the zip tie and causes it to fail in tension. So it basically pops the end of the zip tie off, leaving the zip tie fastened in the connector, which means you don't get that nasty sharp point from clipping it with scissors or wire cutters. Makes a smooth end with the way that it breaks. It's actually fairly pricey, I'd warn you. You know, for something that seems so simple, they'll charge you $35, $40 for it, but it means you don't have sharp ends on your zip ties. service loop, does everybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, service loop means that if you're going to insert an electrical connection, like let's say the power supply on the radio, you don't want to fasten it so that the wire is tight. You want the wire to make a little loop. Not a loop so large that you risk entanglement, but enough of a loop that you can safely and relatively easily pull the connector out. Because you need slack to remove a connector. It seems counterintuitive, but it's true. In order for you to properly do all that, you need to have maybe an inch or two of extra wire sticking out the side. So yes, we want things fastened down, but you don't want to be, you know, zip tying right next to the connector, not to the chassis. So if you have your radio and you zip tie around the radio in order to hold the connector in, that's fine. But picture cutting that connector, now you need to make sure you can disconnect it without having to tear up a whole bunch of wiring. Okay, this one's definitely expensive, and Susie, I apologize. So duct tape is dirt cheap, as we all know. It's like $3, $2, $1 a roll, depending on who you buy from. $4.99. If you get the cheap stuff, it's cheaper than that. So it's $4.99 a roll. Here's the thing about duct tape, and it's great. I mean, it looks great for Susie. It's sticky, and it stays sticky. And after you take it off, it's still sticky. It's just sticky. The alternative is called gaffer's tape. It's made out of cloth, and it's got a silicone-based adhesive. So when you peel it off, it peels off cleanly, and it doesn't leave sticky crap behind. Much more expensive, though. It's like, I keep throwing out this $30 number. I don't know, maybe all engineers want things that are $30, but $30 a roll, roughly. But worth every penny of it.
A lot of that putting the carpets together on the field.
Yeah, so is what they use on the field. Now they buy it in bulk. They're not paying $30 a roll, but on your robot, it means that you can peel the tape off. It will hold securely, but when you peel the tape off, there's no residue left. And also the tape is much better in tension. So if you need to like, because I've seen it before, weave things, like weave a Frisbee blocker, it's much better to do that out of gaffer's tape than out of duct tape. Countersink and deburr. So you can buy whatever countersink you want. High-speed steel countersink will do it. A deburr, there's an Israeli company called Israeli Carbide that makes 90% of the deburrs on the planet. It's basically a little sharp edge. It's not razor sharp, but it's sharp enough that it'll peel off burrs on the edges of metal. And for both of these, you're deburring. So after you cut a hole, there's going to be little sharp spots on the edges or on the hole. You use the countersink to take care of a hole that you've drilled. You use the deburr to take care of the edges. And this one mystifies people, but I debated putting it here, but I'm going to put it here. Don't forget canned air. Okay, what do I mean by that? There's two factors. One is canned air is a really easy way to clean something up. So you've made your pile of shavings. How do you get rid of it? You put a plastic bag in front of it, shoot the canned air into the bag, and off go your shavings into the bag. The practiced but not so effective, let me hold a vacuum underneath the hole as you drill it, is generally not effective. And I've seen it a lot where, you know, somebody's drilling a hole this way and somebody else has a vacuum underneath it. The reason it's not effective is that the drill bit tends to want to pull the chips up. So in order for you to effectively vacuum it, you'd have to have the vacuum on the top. But then you'd have to have the vacuum all the way around, and it gets kind of silly, kind of quick. So cover your electronics, of course, but really using a vacuum while you're drilling is not all that effective. I see it a lot, though. The other reason for canned air is it's a really quick way to cool something down. You have a gas under high pressure. Anybody who's been through chemistry knows that when you drop the pressure on that gas, you're going to cool it off. And in fact, I mean, it's been around since 1998 that you take a can of canned air, turn it upside down, pull the trigger, and you spray minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit refrigerant all over the thing you need cooled off, and it will cool off, I guarantee you. Sim motors, especially effective. Bear in mind that the internals might still be hot. So it buys you margin, but it's not like you're going to cool the whole thing to minus 100. Very useful though. Everybody should have a can of canned air. Okay. I think this is the second to last pre-event slide. Organization. And yes, it's a virtue. Yes, it needs to be worked on. You're not going to get it right the first time. Put everything in its place. Bring some storage mechanism to the event. If you walk out of here with those two concepts, that means I've won. It's much better to take up more physical space in your shop, but be able to find everything, than to try to condense everything into totes to minimize the volume that you're taking up with your storage. And again, storage mechanism, when you show up to an event, you get a table. But everything else is up to you. Some teams roll in a tool chest that has everything they need in it. Some teams will bring assemblable shelving to hold everything. But remember that while you're in your pit, you're going to have a whole bunch of stuff with you, just like in your shop. It's a smaller version of your shop. You're going to need to organize yourself somehow, and that means you need to bring something with you to be organized. If you just show up with totes, it's bad. Several of the same box is better than one each of several options. So go to Home Depot, find your Stanley storage box that fits your fancy, that you like, and use that one box for everything. Have one of them for number 10 fasteners, one for 8s, one for 4s, one for 6s, one for rivets, one for electrical, one for pneumatics, but use that one box because it's a lot easier to just stack that one box or make a shelving hole for that one box and label each separate option than to have to change everything because you've got 4 different boxes. Certainly evaluate your options by looking at everything that's out there, but pick one and stick to it. Don't keep what you don't need, and that's written particularly for need. Buy what you need rather than what is cheap. Don't keep what you don't need means I don't need 5 spools of pneumatic tube because I haven't done pneumatics in 5 years and my kit gives me 5 rolls of pneumatic tubing because I've accumulated them, right? So you say, okay, wait, I need 1 of these. Let me donate the other 4 to somebody else. Maybe you say you need 2. Donate the other 3. Why? Declutters. If you don't do that, you're just going to have an ever-expanding inventory and you're going to be in pain after 5 years because you will have kept something from every prior season and you've just grown. If you have some attachment to these things, go ahead and pack them up and put them somewhere else, but don't keep them in your actively used stuff. Is this a problem that we've seen before? Or maybe no? Actually, the second half of that sentence is probably more important. Buy what you need rather than what is cheap. I can guarantee you that if you go with the cheap option, you will pay for it. You'll buy it 3 times. It'll fail on you when you don't need it to fail on you. Buy what you need rather than what is cheap. The reality is that if you're a first team and you're faced with a delta of $5 between the 2 options, which is typically the difference, and you can't afford that $5, go into your own pocket and put the $5 on the table because it is much more worth putting that $5 into that than to drive yourself crazy for the rest of the season with the problems that cheap part costs. I already made this point. Throw away almost all of the electrical stuff in the kit. Sorry first, I love you, but your electrical stuff in your kit is not very good. Buy spools of wire, quality terminals, ratcheting crimp, already made those points. Lastly, if you want to go totally over the top on this one, ERP systems, enterprise resource planning systems. So these are the tools that run businesses. There's an open source free option called Odoo, which used to be called free ERP or Open ERP. The key element of that system that you need is the inventory tracking mechanism. So essentially, if you have one of these ERP systems that has a bunch of modules that plug into it, you can track your orders, you can track your inventory using this system. It's not a terribly difficult system to learn. If you go to the company and ask for it, they do charge you, but it's fully open source. So if you have somebody who knows a little bit of Linux and they can install it for you on a server that you own, you get it for free, in quotes. Yes?
What does P stand for?
Planning, Enterprise Resource Planning System. So what's that useful for? It means you don't have to go to a spreadsheet, you don't have to go to some scribbled note, you don't have to walk up and down the rows of stuff that you've got. You come up with a location system, you come up with a part numbering system, you number all your parts, you number all your locations, and you go in there and you say, I need a 5/32 rivet. That's a 1/2 inch long. And you search for it in the part list and you find it. No, that's that part number. Oh, what do I have on hand? I have 62 of these on hand, and they're at this location in my rows of shelving, or however you store your stuff. It basically means that you become a warehouse. And you no longer have to manually maintain these things because the ERP system has built into it a transaction mechanism. So when you want to take something out of the inventory, there's a way to record that you took something out of the inventory. It takes some discipline. It's not for every team, but if you have a team that is fairly mature and is able to handle that level of rigor, it's an excellent way to know exactly what you have.
We decided this summer we needed to look for something like this. Okay, thank you.
Touch base with me later.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay. Setting expectations. I'm not going to name names because I'm a professional. We are not all world champions. And when I say world champions in Texas, we all know who I'm talking about. Exactly. Acknowledge where you are, dream what you want to be, and determine what you can do now. So you're going to be a rookie at some point. And then at some point later, you're going to be a third year. That'll be 2 years after you're a rookie. And then some point after that, you'll be a fifth year. That'll be 2 years after that. So you cannot, or at least I think it's a fruitless exercise, to come out of the gate and say, we're going to go win the event. Because you're just not going to. Even if you are that top caliber world champion team and you walk into an event and you'd like to win it, you're not going to generally say, we must win this event. Because you could get a bad schedule, you could get bad alliance selection, any number of things can go wrong. Acknowledge where you are, dream what you want to be, then determine what you can do now. You're not going to get there in one season. Dream big enough that you're going to be this better team, but realize it's going to take time. By setting this expectation and saying, this year we are going to blank, whether that's this year we are going to drive successfully in the first match, or if that means this year we are going to manipulate the game piece for the first time, or this year our autonomous is going to score so many points. Set an expectation that is reasonable that you can do now. Leave your dreams for next season. Okay, particulars about what you do at an event. Events have schedules, as we all know. You should too. You're a team. You have to get everybody to the event. Everybody has to eat lunch. Everybody has to go home. You should have a schedule. Now, is that a schedule where you can say, we're going to eat lunch at 11:07? No. It means that you need to be able to be flexible enough to say, our last match before lunch is at 11:07. Let's make sure lunch is ready at 11:20, or however you want to go about it. But make sure that you have a schedule. If you just go there and try to figure it out, you're going to screw up, which is actually the last point there. This isn't vacation. Pick a time to break for lunch and stick to it. That means that no matter how up to your elbows you are in grease and shavings, you stop and you eat. Because you will foolishly say, no, I'm going to work through lunch. And then it will be 8 o'clock and your stomach will be eating itself from the inside over you not having any food. You're probably going to become fatigued, your blood sugar is going to drop, you're not going to make the greatest of decisions, and you're going to create an unsafe environment for yourself. A team operates as a team. Eat, sleep, work, play as a team. It's kind of like what Patton says at the beginning of his movie, or George C. Scott says at the beginning of Patton. Eat, sleep, work, and play as a team. That means nobody gets exceptions to that rule. It's not like you have the scouting team over here and the build team over there and the drive team over here. You are a team. You work together. And people have to understand how their work impacts others. And as I said, this isn't a vacation. You're not here to just lollygag and have fun, although we want you to have fun. There has to be some purpose to your activity.
That's a hard one for parents
Yeah.
to understand. Why, you were at St. Louis, why didn't you go to the Arch?
Right. And if you can work it in, if you do your schedule and you can go to the Arch or you can go to a baseball game, power to you, go have fun. But if you can't work it in, you can't work it in. Your event plan, it's a continuation. Every team member, adult and student, adults include parents, by the way, not just mentors, need to know what they are doing, what others are doing. They need to be accountable for their part of the plan, which is my nice way of saying not do what somebody else is doing, and not deviate from the plan without consulting the team authorities. Okay, what does this mean? Well, the first two are obvious. Know what you're doing, know what others are doing. If I'm on the pit crew and you're on the drive team, then you're going to come back to me and tell me what went wrong, and I'm going to go fix it. If I'm in scouting, I'm going to deliver this data to our Alliance selection representative so that they know what to do when they get out on the field and they say, Team 7243, what is your first pick? And they don't just do the, okay.
The colorful ones,
The colorful ones.
we got that.
Be accountable for their part of the plan. So that means that if your scouts are falling asleep, they should be reminded through some appropriate mechanism for your team's culture that what they are doing is important. And if your people are falling asleep in the pit, they should know that what they are doing is important. Not deviate from the plan without consulting team authorities. In other words, if we say, after this match, we need to fix this, but we're not going to work on that, like we need to fix the bumper, but we're not going to work on the mechanism we were trying, then you don't work on the mechanism that you're trying. Unless somebody with some authority on the team, lead technical mentor, lead mentor, however you organize yourselves to say this is the person who makes this decision, unless that person says to do it. In other words, no rogue members or students, mentors or students. And additionally, not deviating from the plan applies to parents. If you tell your parents, we don't know when we will be able to leave, but we expect the matches to stop at 5:30. We will not leave until the matches are complete. That means that when Mr. and Mrs. Smith come up and say, I'd like to take Johnny home, you reiterate, no, the team is not leaving until da-da-da-da-da-da. And you stick to it because it's the team. If I went to a football team and I said, I want to take my son Bill home, but practice isn't over yet, the coach is going to say, fine, he's off the team, right? You're a team as much as that football team is a team, so act like it. Maximize your time. So, Susie, to your point about it's hard to get across to parents, here's how you get it across to parents. When you get to this event, you paid a lot of money. I probably should have caps bold, italicized that. You paid $5,000 to walk in the door. $5,000 to walk in the door. You then put somewhere hopefully between $2,000 and $7,000 into your robot and its support mechanisms. You've paid several $1,000s in transportation, lodging, and food to be here. Ignoring the outlay, the money you've raised, the money you've spent is foolish. Particularly how hard it is to raise the money. Remember that while you're at this, work is not restricted strictly to your pit area. So if you need multiple people working on things and your pit's too crowded, send them over to the shop. 9 times out of 10, the shop does not mind you working on the loading dock next to the shop. Scouting is work. Team relationships, in other words, introducing yourself to other teams, understanding what other teams can do, that is work. There's a lot of work to be done, and it happens everywhere. Understand clearly what you need to do to be ready to compete. I had to rush a team through inspection at Houston this year as they were going onto the field because apparently they weren't clear on this idea that you need to pass inspection before you can play a qualifications match. Now, I'm a nice person. Lyndon Bridgewater, the LRI at Houston's a nice person. We rushed them through. We got them their sticker. They played. But they didn't know that they had to do that. So understand clearly what you need to do to be ready to compete, aside from the rules. That's also knowing that when you walk in the door, oh wait, the robot went in the bag and these things were wrong with it. How are we going to fix them, in what order we're going to fix them, and who's going to take what? For the love of all that's holy, don't miss your matches. In registration fees alone, you pay in excess of $500 per regional match. Put that in front of a parent. Well, Johnny left early and he missed one of our matches. You owe us $500. Not saying you actually do that, but I'm saying if you actually put the dollar figure in front of someone, it tends to change their attitude. And that's just the regional registration fee. If you total up your total cost of what it takes for you to build the robot, register for the event, show up, pay for food, pay for lodging, and then divide by 10, that's your cost per match. Please don't forget this second to last point. You have sponsors. They are not charities. They are not people doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They are sponsors. They may well be saying, here's $1,000, do whatever you want to do with it. But you, as a team, do not take that attitude. You value that dollar that they give you. You do everything you can with that dollar that they give you, and you show them what you've done with that dollar that they've given you. Because not every sponsor is a purely altruistic, out of the goodness of their heart, here, have some money. A lot of them are, I'm an engineering company, I want better engineers. How are you making better engineers for me? Acknowledge them. Do not act like they are just giving money away. Appreciate them and they will appreciate you, and you will build a relationship going into the future. Key point, bring them to your events. You can't always get them to your events, but bring them if you can. And show them this well-organized machine that we're laying out here. Everybody knows what they're doing. There's a place for everything and our pit isn't messy. This is our goal for this season. Here's how we're measuring its accomplishment. And then, in terms of maximizing your time at an event, please take Thursday to go long. Go till 8 o'clock. Because you get another shot. They're going to throw you out after closing ceremonies on the other 2 days. If you really are in a position where you've got to pour a huge amount of time into the robot, take advantage of Thursday and make sure that you just pass out that night and come back fresh the next day. If you try to say at the end of the day on Thursday, oh, it's 6 o'clock, I want to leave, I'll deal with this on Friday, your Friday's going to be miserable. So if you're going to pick a miserable day, make Thursday your miserable day. Okay, realism and discipline. So now we're in the event, knee deep in it. What do we do now to make sure that we get the best experience we can out of the event? Fundamentally, you fall into one of 4 categories. You're in great shape, stick to your plan. Keep on going. Everything's lined up for you. You're accomplishing your goals for the season. You're accomplishing your goals for the event. Roll on. You're in good shape. We need to make some tweaks. So you got to figure out what you're going to need to tweak to improve the robot, and you need to figure out how to squeeze that in between your matches. Look at your match schedule, pick your longest break, however you want to go about it. But don't feel that you're locked in at the beginning of the day on Friday or the first qualification match to sticking with the robot that you have. You're not. We're in bad shape, all hands on deck. Okay, the frame is just falling to pieces, but if we replace these 25 rivets, we can get it back together. Don't be afraid to say that. You shouldn't give up. At the same time, if you're late enough in the day, You need to acknowledge that it just didn't go right. And the effort that it would take for us to improve, or the effort that it would take for us to repair, is just not worth it. And there's times when that happens. It is to take a lackluster performance at an event this year and come back next year more successful, energized for another shot, than to totally burn yourself out, annoy your mentors, lose people, and not come back for the next year. It's a tough decision. It is not one to be taken lightly, and it's not one to be taken early. That number 4 is mostly for Friday night. Okay, we look at the field, we look at us. Our honest assessment is we're not going to reach eliminations. Okay, we're going to do what we're supposed to do. We're going to pass the second inspection at the end of our last qualification match. We will dutifully, as good members of the community, go to the stands and listen to the alliance selection. We will respect the teams that are selected. We will then pack up our pit and we will prepare to go home. I would encourage you to stay for the awards because I think that's the right thing to do. But when it comes to your team, you consider, okay, the pit is packed up and it's staged on the loading dock ready to go. It's in somebody's trailer. The event's over. You just say, we're done. Let's just enjoy the elimination matches. Let's watch them. Congratulate the people who win. Congratulate the award winners. And go home with our heads held high, learning something from this event. If you do the opposite and you say, it's Friday night and we're probably not going to make eliminations, so let's do X, Y, Z, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, and then at that point our robot will be picked. No. And I don't mean to be blunt, but no. It's 9 times out of 10 not going to happen. The reason that 9 times out of 10 it's not going to happen is that the teams that are in that top 8 have already scouted you. They already know what you can do, and they're going to judge their alliance selections based on what you've already done on Friday. Very few teams that I am aware of will look at Saturday's performance and take a team that they were not already looking at and pull them up into their pick list. It just doesn't happen. It's a consistency, reliability problem. You know, if you couldn't do it on Friday, why can't you do it on Saturday? And lastly, from their perspective as scouts, you don't want to burn your scouts out. Have your scouts do Friday and then give them Saturday off. It's not worth it.
Is this for the 3102?
Beg your pardon?
Is this rank 3102?
Yes, I might be running just a little long.
Okay, it's fine.
Okay.
Just want to find it.
Key point, this depends on your team, its state, and its culture. So there are some teams that will just like go full bore, all 8 cylinders right to the last minute. There's teams that, you know, you're a rookie. That's the state you're in. Or you're rebuilding. You've lost all your mentors. That's the state you're in. So there's a little bit of a, I don't want to call it a caveat necessarily, but there's like this extra dimension to this whole concept, which is you got to tailor it toward your team. And of course, let us not forget, you're supposed to have fun, right? It's supposed to be an inspiring experience. We're supposed to be taking students as mentors, and sometimes mentors as students, showing them why this is cool. So driving yourself mad trying to do something that you don't have the resources to do is not fun. Driving yourself to exhaustion is not fun. So my 2 final pieces of advice are, number 1, it's all in the getting there. Teams that achieve quick success, in my experience, power to them, congratulations, I hope you enjoyed it, will not have sustained success. And when I say sustained success, I mean they come back year after year. The team that is wonderfully successful early tends to not be a long-term sustaining team. The team that builds themselves into that state of success through process, through discipline, through culture, through attitude, that's the team that's around for 22 years. Dozens of teams I've seen gone by where they get some eager whiz of an engineer to design their robot, and then that whiz of an engineer either doesn't like what's going on or something happens in their life and they have to leave, and the team just crumbles because you're depending on that one personality. But if you are a team, you do not depend on any one personality. Yes, there are leaders. I'm all for student leadership. I'm all for mentor leadership. But you can survive people moving on with their lives. You can survive people changing their mind about participating. And you've taken the input of these mentors and students over the years and folded them into this thing called the team. Not relying on the individuals who made the contributions. The New York Yankees of the 1950s were not awesome because of the individuals who were on the team. They were this awesome powerhouse of a baseball team because of the attitude. Everybody knew what they were doing. Everybody had confidence that they would get it done, and they won 6 or 7 World Series. And they had guys come, they had guys go, but they still kept their streak running. And only when they emptied the clubhouse and nobody was left did they fall off of that streak. It's all in the getting there. It's all in the getting there. Why? Because this is about learning. This is not about winning. Yeah, winning's fun. Won't take it away from anybody. It's all in the getting there. It means that as a student, you need to not say, we're a student-led team. Because if you're a student and you say we're a student-led team, you are fundamentally limiting your own self. You are acting like you know more than the engineer that you are asking to help. That's not to say that there isn't such a thing as student leadership. But it means that if you want these experienced engineers to help, you need to acknowledge that this experience is all in the getting there. It is about you learning from that engineer, and that engineer learning from you. It does go both ways. Because face it, most engineers are not so great dealing with high school kids. Dave Lavery had it best in 2008 at kickoff when he said, "But Dave, it's so hard. This is supposed to be hard." That was his response. People were saying, at the time he was on the game design committee, he's a NASA guy, he's a pretty prominent figure in FIRST. People were saying to him, "You can't expect high school kids to do this." His response was essentially, "I'm not expecting high school kids to do this. I'm expecting a team of engineers and high school kids to do this." And if you take it as just one or the other, just the engineers build the robot and deliver it to the kids don't get anything out of it. If you take it as the kids do everything, then they don't have that guiding hand. They don't have that expertise and the knowledge and the discipline of what is engineering, what is the field, and what is technology to learn from. It is a balance. It is a wonderful balance that everybody grows from. And I hope that you have many good events in your future, and I hope that your teams last forever. And I hope that I've helped that today. Thank you.
Stick the first slide back.